Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 131st edition of the Frank and Stan chat. And this is actually the last edition of 2022. And we've got a guest back with us again this time. It was the same time last year when Eric Craven, somebody I've called the Scouse poet, joined us, and it was a very, very popular edition. And Stan and I really enjoyed it. So welcome back, Eric Craven.
Hi, Eric.
Thank you very much indeed, chaps. It's lovely to be back, and I feel somewhat privileged to be making a return to this wonderful podcast.
And actually, there's some big news today, Eric, isn't there? You've launched something today.
Yes, I think it's entirely coincidental, of course, that I'm.
I think you were capturing all the viewers that we get here to sort of push it out.
I like to piggyback. And yes, today I've launched my own website, poetry website. I'm grateful for you allowing me to plug it. It's ericscraven.com. Very simple, ericscraven.com. I've got about 50, a little more than 50 poems on there at the moment, but I do intend to add more, obviously, regularly, and there's an opportunity for people to subscribe, so they'll be alerted when new poems are added. And there's also an opportunity to contribute poems. So you'll see on the website there's a chance, if you want to submit a poem or two or three to me, and I'll obviously have to vet them, but I intend to put them on a guest part of the website. In fact, there are 5 poems up there now already from other people, as you'll see. So do have a look, do subscribe, hopefully enjoy it as well.
And also there's a little clip of your school report, Eric, when you left school, I think.
Yes.
I thought it was just a little clip of it, but it was the entire report.
No, that was yes, you did. You emailed me to say you liked the clip. It was about 5 or 6 sentences long, my entire school report from the late 60s. And it's on the website, yes.
Great.
Yeah, I found that. I thought it was a bit of fun.
And in the past, though, for people who didn't watch the episode last year, just a little summary of who you are and what you do.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I am a retired HMI. We work together quite closely, Frank, as you'll remember. It'll be indelibly etched on your memory. And prior to that, I was a head teacher of 3 special schools, 2 of them for pupils with severe learning difficulties, and another one that was for pupils with learning difficulties and behaviour problems. I was also the SEN inspector for the Wirral and also a school improvement advisor for Halton. I took up writing poetry about 2 years ago when I watched the Hungry Horse folk club on Zoom, and they were obviously singing and playing, but also occasionally somebody would read a poem, and that quite captured me. And so I read other people's poems to start with, and then began writing my own, and haven't stopped since.
And you've actually appeared on BBC Radio Merseyside, or...
Yeah. Well, you don't appear on the radio, but I know what you mean.
Yeah. The voice of.
Yes, it was a friend that told me about an upload service that the BBC have. So I uploaded 3 poems to them for them to consider, and they seemed to be taken by them. So a researcher got in touch and invited me onto a broadcast later that week. So it was a live broadcast with a chap called Jermaine Foster, and I did very much as what we're doing now, talked about the poems, the origin of them, and read 3 of them out.
Great. Well, how are you? Well, very welcome, Eric. How are you, Stan, today?
Okay, dealing with a few leaks and bursts in my mother's house, but apart from that, getting ready for Christmas, nearly there. Bit of shopping yet to do, but we're not late yet. Even it's not even Christmas.
Well, do you leave home to shop, Stan?
Yeah, I'm not as much these days as I used to, but we used to many years ago. It used to be a group of lads on Christmas Eve would go out to do their Christmas shopping, go to the pub for lunchtime, and I have stories of the kind of things that were bought in the afternoon. Now, the one I'll always remember is a guy going home very proudly with this so old now, a ship with a bulb behind it as a lamp for his girlfriend.
Wow, wow.
Sing the good idea
I
of
want
the
to,
time.
what I was getting at is how easy it is to shop online. This morning, for example, I found I needed some GU10 bulbs for spotlights, and I just emailed or text my son-in-law, who's got a Amazon Prime account, sent him the link, and they're here tomorrow morning. They'll be here. Haven't left the chair. So swift. I mean, it's a shame, really, because there's something to be said for actually visiting shops. I realise that.
Yeah, and it's also what it's shown is that some of the things that we relied on for years, and I'm not having to go at the post office, but them as much as others who can't work that system. So I look at sometimes when I'm buying something, and if it's going to come via Royal Mail or come via Amazon, it's better going. If you need it urgently, Amazon will do a lot of stuff next day delivery.
I have to say,
absolutely.
I do find it. I mean, yesterday we must have had 6 calls from Amazon drivers delivering stuff. There must be a way. I mean, this is very not good for the environment. This is it. There must be a way, like the post office do, whereby they're all bundled up and they all arrive in one go, rather than 6 people delivering 6 parcels. There's got to be a way of doing that.
But you can do that on the website, Frank.
Oh, can you? Oh, you can consolidate them.
You can say, I'd rather have one drop with all 5 things on rather than 5 different drops. But I am a supporter of Royal Mail and everything that goes with it. And I think, if it was as regular and as reliable as others, I wouldn't use anybody else. But at the moment, in the last 12 months, 18 months, it's just not been that reliable.
Well, I just to putting it out there in case our postie's watching.
Our
postwoman is amazing, and we love her. The thing is, we were going to not talk. We've got lots to get through today.
Yeah.
So, Eric, do you want to start with a poem?
Of course I will. Yeah.
What's this one about?
This one was stimulated by a friend of mine, a head teacher friend of mine, who wrote a poem about his a surprise poem about his father. And this one's called "There's Something in the Garden." There's something in the garden. I can see a shadowy shape. There it is behind the shed. I think it's wearing a cape. I wish the moon was full so we could see more clearly. It's pitch black out there. I'm staying in here. Yes, really. Look, it's moving slowly now. It's heading towards the house. Quick, draw the curtains, be as quiet as a mouse. Pick up that walking stick. Just whisper so it can't hear. I hope it can't smell too well, as it's going to smell my fear. It's trying the kitchen door now. It's double locked, don't worry. It's heading round to the front. Put the chain on the door, hurry. The letterbox is opening. I can see a pair of eyes. They're bloodshot and bulbous, the size of mini pork pies. I can smell its pungent breath. Things are becoming quite clear. They're my granddad's eyes, and that smell is beer. Thank you, chaps.
Where did that come from, Eric?
A friend of mine wrote a poem about his dad coming out of the sea and the youngster saying it's a monster and he's
I see.
It turned out to be his dad, so it kind of got me thinking along those lines. It's on the website.
Right, Stan, what's
www.ericscraven.com.
Yeah,
exactly. Thank you very much, Stan.
Stan, we're going to have to keep what's caught our eye this week.
Right, well, just
short, but
very quickly then, the DFE have done some risk assessments on buildings, and moved from likely that there'll be some school buildings collapse to very likely and critical that some school blocks will collapse. They don't know of any that will risk life and limb, or that they don't know of any. In other words, there might be some, but we can't identify those for various reasons.
Now, tellingly, they haven't told the school.
No, I think the shadow minister has asked them to come to the house and name the buildings, but they are going to do something about the ones that they think are at risk, but there's not enough money to do them all, so they're doing the ones that are at most risk.
So the risk assessing the risks.
Yeah, and but anybody who's done a risk assessment, if you've got something on your risk assessment that moves from likely to very likely, and it's also on your critical line, you need to do something about it.
I don't know what will be the position if there is I mean, don't want it to happen, but if there was an injury from one of those, when in fact the DfE knew about it but didn't actually tell the school, so the school were unaware. If they'd known, they could have kept children away from that area.
There's all sorts of things, isn't there, Frank? Though there's if a MAT took it over from the local authority and didn't do a proper risk assessment, or that who carries the can for that? It's a really scary.
I remember when hundreds of years ago, when I was at school, the school I went to was in Liverpool on Queen's Drive. And it was a very modern building, and it was, I can't remember how long, but it wasn't very long, that they said the longevity of this school is predicted to be 20, 30 years and no more. And it was only knocked down a few years ago, after, probably 50 or 60 years, and it's now a Marks and Spencer's food hall. But, so these things were all in existence before risk assessments were in existence, of course.
Yes.
But I have to say, thankfully, I can't recall any schools that have fallen down.
There was a couple in Scotland, wasn't there, where the sides...
Really?
Where in strong winds, the sides of the gymnasium blew down.
Right, of course, yeah.
And then there was a lot of construction around schools that were built along the same pattern to make sure that didn't happen.
But it's the fact that it's gone to likely, isn't it? This is the thing, it's the likelihood of it has increased, I think, significantly with the term that they're using to capture the risk.
But in my school, I remember them coming in one week and saying, right, we need to take out all the tiles, the ceiling tiles in the corridors because they've got asbestos in them. We'll do it in the holiday. Well, I had to go in during the holiday to get some stuff, and all these people are in white suits and there's plastic everywhere. And I said, "Can I go in my office?" Yeah, you can. So I was the only person in the building with no protection whatsoever as they took this.
Okay, Eric, what's caught your eye this week?
Actually, I know you've got a really keen interest in cricket, more so than I have, but mine is keen. And particularly enjoy watching the England Test team, and I wanted just to raise and credit them really for the wonderful way they've turned themselves around and become free-flowing cricketers with wonderful success. And it obviously is a two-person job, isn't it? Stokes, the captain, and Nicollum, the manager, have done this, and they've just freed up the players, developed a culture, and the players are thriving, and are probably the best or nearly the best cricket team in the world at the moment. And it's happened in about 11 months. Astonishing.
I know it's interesting because I'm a big cricket fan, but they're heading off to New Zealand. Which in New Zealand will be a difficult task because New Zealand are currently the World Test champions. But then, of course, next summer they have the Ashes over here, and that will be a big test. But actually, we always try and bring it back to education, but this is about sort of leadership, which is willing to accept that risks need to be taken in order to improve. And actually, it's funny because you wrote a poem about Joe Root, didn't you? And I think Joe Root's leadership became quite constrained. You know, I don't know whether that's within his nature or whether it was the management that were sort of, you know, he didn't feel able to fully play an open game in the way that Stokes can. But actually, he's under this new leadership, he's blossomed again into the world class player that we know he is. And it's fantastic to see young players coming in feeling as though I'm going to give it a go. You know, I'm not going to be dropped because I've done something right for the team.
Yeah, I mean Stokes doesn't look, or it doesn't sound as though he's got any weight whatsoever on his shoulders. But when Root was captain, he was carrying a heavy weight. You could feel it, couldn't you?
He was.
So the managers really, or the manager has kind of lifted that weight, and it's so liberating. It's great to see.
It's interesting. Go on, Stan. You're going to.
I'll just say it'd be interesting. I think he's already been on twice, so I might not allow him to come back a third time. He may have been on 3 times. Mike Rotherham. Mike works with the women's cricket team, or did do, and he shared with me when we were doing some work on culture the things that they'd done as a group to create the culture in which they would. Well, they became champions, didn't they?
Yes, world champions.
Yeah, and it's little, really small things, committing to things. I mean, we were going to use one when we were talking with a group of heads, but there was a lot of really bad language in it of what they will do. But it was simple things like, you know, we will dive for the ball if it's going past us. You know, we won't let anybody, our team members, down. We're there to fight, and a set of things that they all absolutely committed to. And they weren't going to, they got each other's backs, things like that are important when you're under, you know, if you're the one person at the crease, you're under tremendous pressure. You've got to know that everybody who's sat in the pavilion is going to back you, whichever way it goes. You know, if you swing and you're out, they back you. If you hit the 6 that wins the game, they back you.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that in education, we've sort of, in this effort to quality assure everything, you know, and there are ways of doing this, you know, that you can go around and really encourage as a senior leader, you know, and you can encourage risk taking, you know, within reason. And actually, I think that's what Stokes has done, McCullum have done, you know, that, and it's all about what's in the best interest of the team rather than the individual. And I think that cricket's a really weird game because, you know, too often we consider, oh, well, Root's got this great batting average, but not consider, well, it's all right having that great batting average, but if his sides are losing all the time, it's worthless. So actually, the issue here is about the individual teacher and the role they play and teaching staff play in what is the overall package for the school. And it's very similar in a way, I think, teaching to what cricket can feel like, where you are simply playing for yourself. And you're not really, all right, I'm playing the team, you know, but as long as I get a good innings, that's the most important thing out of this. Well, I think Stokes and McCullum have blown that apart, you know, big time. So I think it's great.
Well, that's where it needs widening now, Frank, to say we're not just doing it for the class, we're not just doing it for the school, we're doing it for the community that we serve.
Yeah.
And schools really working together as opposed to, well, not competing as much as we used to.
Yeah,
it's just helping, isn't it? It's encouraging.
I've been doing some work with schools on looking at what high quality teaching and learning will look like in special school classrooms. I work almost exclusively in special schools, so that's the reason. And we've looked at things like relationships with adults, because special schools, more than anywhere else, the teachers in classrooms in special schools are managers of others. They're leaders of others, because they invariably have at least one, often many more adults working with them full or part-time. And we've talked about those kind of relationships and what they might look like in practice in a classroom. And a part of the work that I think we've invested in what we think the expectation should be in classrooms are affirmations. How vital affirmations from one person to another is. And that person, the other person, could be a child and should be a child, but it can be other adults as well. So meaningful heartfelt affirmations are such potent arrows in a teacher's quiver.
Don't you
Not to be
think,
Do you
underestimated.
know what? That's the poet talking there, isn't
Yeah,
it?
but isn't that true, Eric? In your role as school improvement officer, though, that working with head teachers, a lot of it is affirmation of what they want to do or are doing, and they just need to know that you agree with them. It's a good thing to do. It's the right thing to do. I mean, occasionally you have to say no, but most of the times, just sitting, listening, and saying, "Yeah, that sounds like."
Yeah. Or you just say, "Well, have you thought about?" I always used to say, "Have you thought about this?" You know. Okay,
There are ways in, Frank.
we're gonna have to move on because we're gonna run out of time here. So my point for this week was we're in the middle of it feels like a national strike, to be honest. It's all but that by name, and we sadly have had to experience we've had to use the NHS quite extensively this week in the family, but you know the and I've been into hospitals on a number of occasions, and where I went, you know, the staff are still putting a full shift in, and I've absolute respect for them. And the strike action that they're taking, the working to rule, all of this sort of stuff is, you know, if I mean, we have such an important sort of national treasure in a sense, and clearly, you know, there are reforms and improvements that are made, but when you get to a position where you can't even negotiate with your employer, you know, because you're constrained by decisions that have been made by the government, you know, what else you've got? What else can you do? You know, there's nowhere else to go, is there? And it feels as though that, you know, what is unraveling is the sense of and it affects us in teaching. You know, the independent pay review body, which teachers have, is not really independent. You know, because the figure given to the independent review body is a figure about a settlement figure which has got to be within a range, you know, so it cannot exceed this amount. So, you know, their hands are tied. And
you pick the people on it. The government pick the people on the rebate on the committee. They put the limits on what can be spent, and then have the nerve to say it's independent.
I know. And I think going back to education, if we had a dispute like this, we would be, all of us, I think everybody would be looking to find a way where we could sit down in a room and try and resolve the issues. You know, I think you know, sitting on our hands, you know, will not settle this. And it looks as though, you know, the government are up for. It does look as though they're up for a fight over this. They're not willing or cannot bend. You know, whether it's because the budget that Hunt set was too tight, and just, you know, they have no more money. You know, and they're worried about escalating. You know, it's not to do with inflation. It's to do with, you know, whether they got the money at the end of the day. You know, so whether that's the driver and they don't want to admit it, but whatever it is, there needs to be, you know, I think disputes like this need to be resolved by sitting down and talking, not actually just saying, well, there's my final offer, take it or leave
it. Interesting. My wife was in work in the National Health in a variety of roles, including a midwife, clinic nurse, school visiting school nurse as well. And she expressed the view that it was very, very difficult for her to imagine going on strike, even at this stage in the proceedings. It was in her psyche that there was never ever a thought that she could up sticks, so to speak. Now I know it's not as simple as that. They're not up in sticks, are they? They've got plenty of contingency plans in place. But it was really interesting when she said that there was no way she would ever strike.
Yeah, I have to say, Eric, I had an incident when I was a young teacher, where it hadn't happened during a strike. It happened during a holiday. A young lad from the school drowned, and I sort of took it quite deeply and thought, if I'd been on strike that day, because it was late 70s when there were work to rules and strikes, and that lad had drowned as a result of not being in school, I wondered whether my conscience would let me live with that. And I resolved then I would support people who were going on strike, but I didn't think morally I could do it. But there comes a point where if you can't negotiate your way out of it, there
Yeah.
has to be a point where you say enough is enough. And I
Yeah.
think there are so many organisations, particularly public bodies, that are saying enough is enough. That something's got to change.
Yeah.
I just worry
Yeah.
that it favours a conservative government if there is dispute with unions, because they're able to link that to the opposite party, the Labour Party, and say, oh, you know, as it was said this week, your mates.
Yeah.
Well,
it's like the RMT. Apparently, support for the rail strike is waning. So I suppose if you dig in long enough, I think the government might think, well, it will wane eventually. But
is it waning?
well, YouGov poll was suggesting that it is. That it's moved to a sort of 50-50 view on it. And I think for those who don't, I mean, for those, some people use the railways around the Christmas period who wouldn't normally use it, to get to family and whatever. Fat chance of using the railways, over the holidays. So I think that disruption might, for people who don't use it very often, might actually see further people supporting, or not being satisfied with the strike action. But at the end of the day, this is about a right to withdraw your labour. And actually, I think if that happens, it's just that point we were making. You've got to sit down and talk about it. And RMT is saying that the employers want to talk about it, but the government are constraining them, are restricting them. So yeah, I mean, trying to bring it back. If we had a dispute, we'd want to talk about it in a school setting, I'm sure.
I just wonder whether it'd be worth, that they say we can't have 19%. Well, why not say, right, we're confident we're going to get inflation down, so we'll tie your next 3 wage claims to inflation.
Yeah. Well, I think that's part of the negotiation, isn't it?
If we can get inflation down, you won't get as big a rise.
Yeah.
There just has to be a conversation, doesn't there, around the table, and there isn't.
Yeah. Eric, have you got another poem for us?
Yes, I have actually. This one, I'm quite a nostalgic person, and this one I've written about life being in the 60s being much simpler, much more fun, and rewarding than perhaps it is now. This one's called Life in the 60s. Do you remember when your GP came to you? When Saturday mornings were taken up with a matinee? When dogs roamed in packs and elm trees lined the roads? And as kids, all you did each summer was play? The coalman and the milkman travelled the streets. You rented your TV from Rediffusion or Martin Dawes. You'd be sent for shillings for the meter, and you get your money back on your bottles, of course. Ice creams were paraded backwards in the cinema. You played darts and dominoes in the living room. With crepe paper, you'd make your own Christmas decorations, and the binmen would tidy up after themselves with a broom. Lampposts all had shoes hanging on them. The chippy wanted old newspapers for a bag of chips in exchange. Our cinema had opera glasses for those in the balcony. You'd have half pennies and threepenny bits in your loose change. We'd race on our bikes and throw balls to hit the curb. Jacks and ollies and hopscotch were the games we all enjoyed. The neighbours came out and everyone played round us. And if you lost, nobody at all got annoyed. The lemonade man would deliver your pop. People would knock for money for the pools and the Prue. And Mr. Whippy played his tune regardless of season. If no meat was available, you'd have a blind stew. Blaming someone else for something was unheard of. Litigation was simply an unknown word. You took things stoically and on the chin, and you knew that moaning would just be absurd. Jimmy Clitheroe and Old Mother Riley were favourites. Randall and Hopkirk deceased, and Morecambe and Wise. Callan had his swinging light bulb and his friend Lonely. The saint and man in a suitcase were the good guys. On a Sunday on the radio, it was family favourites. At other times, Uncle Mac and the Navy Lark. If the money was tight and you needed some help, you had neighbours and mates and not a loan shark. Sweets came in paper bags and 2 ounces. Spangles, blackjacks, and fruit salads filled your digestive tract. Lucky bags, gobstoppers, sherbet fountains, and flying saucers. Mars bars were massive, and bags of crisps were jam-packed. Bob a Job was a way to do good and earn a badge. Monkey bars kept us active and fit in the park. Life was so much easier and simple then. For good old fun, the 60s is a benchmark.
Wow.
Thanks, fellas.
Actually, some of the stuff there, I hadn't thought of, like Bob a Job.
Yeah.
That's gone out of my mind completely.
You wouldn't get around that at all by safeguarding, would you? Safeguarding rules that out. I can remember cutting somebody's lawn with a pair of scissors because they had no lawnmower for a shilling.
Is that on your website as well? The ericscraven.com
ericscraven.com. It happens to be on the website.
Right. So if you love that one, then there are many more. You can get it there. I mean, one of the things that I've been doing is just looking back over the last year, and it's great that I noticed that our viewing figures for this chat are up 10% this year, and the length of time that people have spent watching the videos is up by over 12%, which is great. But there are two sort of league tables in my head. There's the one that has the most views, which I've got a top 10 for. But there's also the ones where the length of time that people watch the video. So the analytics tells you that. And actually, it's really interesting. The number one most length of time watched by people who watched it, not necessarily, it was quite a high number that watched it, was the Ofsted rant. Episode 113 was in fact the one that people listened to or watched for the longest period of time. And that was followed then by Graham Duncan. I don't know if you remember from Right to Succeed, the charity that does work in across the country, but is doing some brilliant work in North Birkenhead and in Blackpool, and is about to roll out into Liverpool. And Mike Rotherham and Lucy Truman's piece, they came on together. That had a long period of viewing. And then Maeve Birdsall and Jasmine Priestley, the two early years experts from Leeds, who are sort of, I suppose, national leaders in early years education. And finally, in fifth place was Emma Ainsworth, one of the very first editions that we had in this year. Emma's piece, episode 84, that came in fifth in the length of time that people watched it. I actually sort of thought about some of the highlights for me. This year we had the 100th edition, where we had Professor Andy Hargreaves joining us from, where was he? Was he in Canada at that time?
Yeah, I was in, was it Ottawa, is it?
I think it was Ottawa. And it was joined with Neil Smith and Rebecca Smith, two head teachers who are married to each other, who we've had on before. But I was also conscious of the fact we did a Wakefield Live. We did our first live event of the Frank and Stan chat in front of about 200 in York for a Wakefield head teachers conference. I'm still getting over that, to be honest. The technology didn't quite work as well as, or I think I was too excited. I forgot how to do everything, But
and there were some really challenging questions there.
One of which,
when you were trying to tie it into education about the Welsh rugby team and how well they were doing, you tried to tie that back to a school issue.
But the ones that are stuck in my mind, and I do revisit these, and there are, to be honest, we had 51 guests this year. And I wanted to say thank you to all of those guests who've given up their time freely, and we make no money out of this. People just give up their time, and we put it up, and we do it, don't we, Stan, just for ourselves and for the chat, because the guests we have on, including this week's, by the way, are brilliant guests to have, make the chats much better than it's just you and me. But the ones that stick in my mind are the Dan Morrow conversation we had, the CEO of a MAT in the Dartmoor area, and he has really got a clarity of thinking about what principled leadership feels like, looks like, and how he acts it out. That was That's one that sticks with me. Dame Alison Peacock, talking about, what was it, Stan?
Well, she said when we asked her how it had gone, she said it was like being interviewed by Malcolm and Wise.
Then I just a shout out for my brother Barry Norris, who was actually he wanted to see Room 101. He wanted to put all sort of end of year examinations into Room 101 because he wanted to go back to a time when teachers assessed their students and there was more moderation of that assessment going on. So we reduced the impact of final exams. Jenny Molyneux and her father, Dave Hewitt, that conversation I really enjoyed. And I just wanted to shout, both Stan and I wanted to reach out to Jenny because I know it's been an absolutely awful year for Jenny in many ways. But we will reach out again in 2023 because we'd love Jenny and Dave to come back again. And our thoughts are with you, Jenny, and your family at this time of the year. And also Lucy Truman, who was on very, very recently, talking about going off to university. She's got a very successful business that advises major organizations on how to do change management and all this. But she's put herself out there and gone back to university to study for a master's in the psychology around leadership, I think it is.
It's psychology of it's organizational psychology,
and that's it. Yeah,
that affects it.
So for me, those were
what Lucy does, though, Frank. I don't know if you know this. She has a reading days in her business where everybody has to take a day off and read, and they have to then sort of give feedback about what they've read. And it's part of her philosophy that, you know, if you're working so hard and doing so much, you don't update yourself and don't read.
Well, that's interesting because Phil Naylor, do you remember Phil Naylor who wrote Naylor's Natter? Shout out to Phil at South Shore Academy in Blackpool and all the colleagues there. He joined us with John Stevens, the CEO of BFET. And in his book, Naylor's Natter, he talks about having a staff library. And again, it's similar. Let's choose a topic. Let's give you some time to do some research of your own, and let's in effect have a seminar instead of a sort of departmental meeting. Let's have a discussion around what we've learned and what our views are on this particular topic, which I thought was a really simple way, because he was looking at what's the value of spending money on a big name speaker. Is it probably better to get people together who share a similar sort of interest or whatever to try and develop their understanding rather than get an entertaining national speaker in across the earth.
Increasingly, schools are getting staff to engage in research. I think certainly in my experience, I was in a school only on Monday, my last visit to a school this year, and the head teacher had managed to find some resource to free up teachers with a focus on research for that afternoon or morning they'd been off, and take it through as much as you can to impact. So, but I hear that more and more and more.
Yes, yeah.
That kind of teachers being liberated, and I mean, I have a think about feedback from courses you go on that. Invariably somebody won't let you out the room till you've filled in a feedback form.
And, Stan's got a good way of doing that.
Oh, I
do it now by sending something 6 weeks later.
Yeah. Oh, that's.
We have these.
I'm a nice one. My first question is, do you remember the course?
Well, we had these. It was a morning, wasn't it? It was only a morning conference, and then we were providing lunch, and comments on this card was your dinner ticket. So if you didn't have your dinner ticket, you didn't. Worked really well.
I wouldn't apply for a job at Mori if I was you.
Well, what I'll do, let me give you now the top 10 most viewed, and then we'll go into Eric's final poem. So these are the most views by episode. And I have to say, if people's episodes are earlier in the year, they're more chance of getting views than if they're more recent. So I have noticed that even some of our early episodes, Stan, are still getting viewed by others. So the numbers are increasing. But in 10th place is Sam Strickland, who wrote about the behaviour manual. 9th, and this is going to be interesting, this Johnny Mitchell and Caroline Foster, a recent one that we had, which was great fun together. Kendra Allen, edition 122, and she's coming back in this list, Kendra. Caroline Foster, so eat your heart out, Johnny Mitchell. Caroline came on her own without Johnny Mitchell, and she had much higher viewing figures than when Johnny was there. Then Sir David Carter comes in at 5th. At 4th, Dan Worsley, the author, the children's writer that we had on World Book Day, and we've got Dan coming back around that time again. Really interesting, these top 3. We had Bryn Llewellyn and Alan Davis talking about a book they'd written called very recently called Move and Learn, and it was about how in effect, with learning is too static. It's stuck behind tables when actually learning is out there. And this book is encouraging a much freer way of looking at learning. They came in at 3rd. 2nd was Nick Atherton. Now, Nick is a landscape architect. Remember, he was talking about projects he was doing around sustainability and done a major project down in Sussex. And Nick's chat has gone through the roof. It was a very, very recent one. But
if I was looking for some negatives there, Frank, that's the only episode I didn't do.
Yeah. Was it done with Kendra and me?
Was it Kendra or was it Susan Brackout?
Oh, Susan. It was Susan. Yeah. It was Susan Brackout. And actually in top place, appearing for the 2nd time on that list, is Kendra Allen. So in effect, Kendra appears 8th and 1st on that list. So thank you to every guest. That's the top list, the top 10 for this year.
Kendra's determined because the 2 that did the look and move, one of them's a cousin.
Oh, yeah.
They've been battling out for performance figures.
Well, I think if Kendra combined her 2 appearances, she'd be off the Richter scale. But I have to say a shout out to Susan Brickell, to be honest, because Susan's been a regular visitor to our chat, and she was top dog last year. She's still doing very well this year, but it's really just great that the breadth of people that we're able to draw in now, and we've got guests lined up to the end of April. And we've got some so I'm really excited about some of the guests that we've got lined up. Some of them are national figures, but others are, like you and me, Stan, just getting on with life, trying to keep breathing
and across.
Contribute. But anyway, so before we say Merry Christmas and thank you, everybody, Eric, you've got one more poem for us, I think.
Yeah. I suppose after that listing you've just given, Frank, I feel like I've come somewhere beyond number 10 in Sports Personality of the Year.
The problem with your appearance, Eric, is that it's the last one in the year. So actually, you've got no chance of winning these leagues.
Well, it's either that or I don't have many friends.
I'm going to try and dig out how many views you had last year, Eric. While you do your poem, I'll find that information out.
Okay. This we mentioned cricket before. This is a poem I've written a while ago now, and it's called Joe Root, and it's about Joe Root. When I wrote it, he was captain of the England cricket team. Joe Root. The crack of the willow, the stamp of the boot, the roar of the crowd, and that's 4 for Root. He's captain courageous, having to save us again. He's in commanding form, and so he takes the strain. The Aussies are strident. They've 4 out already. Amid the mayhem, Joe stays steady. He takes 2 to long on and then sweeps for 4. It's the last of the over, but he wants some more. He takes guard again. His defence is unbreakable. He's hit by a bouncer, but Joe is unshakable. He's composed and ready to go once again. A tap to mid-on and he's off like a train. A change of bowler, and now it's Stark. No need to worry, Joe's play is hallmark. Stark's line and length would worry most. Not Joe, of course, he'll have him on toast. He reaches 50 and raises his bat with a grin. He takes guard again as the Aussies turn to spin. Nathan Lyon comes on and one keeps low, but nothing to worry about for our man Joe. We're 6 down now, but Joe stands firm. Lyon gets turn that would make most men squirm. Joe blocks 3, then comes down the wicket. A 6 into the pavilion, that's the ticket. He reaches his ton and he saved the day. 9 men down, but it's the end of play. Joe is lauded, and quite rightly so. He's the ace in our pack, our generalissimo. Merry Christmas.
Well done, Eric. I feel as though, yeah, I love these. I mean, there's one also you do about elastic as well, which is that on the website, the Lazzy one? Because I think that
Lazzy one, yeah. The majority of the poems I write are obviously whimsical.
Yeah,
Not all of them, but the majority are.
But I have to say that when I read that,
if I had an opportunity to put something in room 101, Frank,
yes, and you are going to,
it would be impenetrable poetry. Impenetrable. There's some poetry that it may mean a lot to lots of people, to most people, but some of it means nothing to me. I've got one here. I just literally put up wrote poems into Google, and this came up. I'll read you a couple of lines.
Okay.
In the dreary February underbelly, Atlantic Ocean outside my window, draped in silk pajamas and flaxen, I lie belly up on my bed, my laptop resting on a pillow. As the angels conducted brain surgery, scraped my head clean while angelic. Frequency healer directed them by name. Now, you've got to help me out here. I don't even say who it's from.
I think I said to you, Eric, I've still got my...
If that's not going in 101, what is?
Well, I said to you before, I think I've got my O-level poetry anthology book upstairs, and I've revisited a couple of those poems, and I have to say some of them meant nothing to me at the time, and I read them now, and they mean nothing to me again. But anyway, so Impenetrable Poems is in room 101.
Thank you.
No, it's been great having you. Do you want to wish Merry Christmas, Stan?
Yeah, to everybody. Let's. We've not had the best 2 last Christmases, have we? They've been, or 3 probably now, that have not been fantastic. My wife was just reminding me before that we took we have a dining room and a living room with doors on, and we took the doors off last year to make sure there was a flow of air through when our family came. But you were allowed at that point to have Christmas, but windows open at one end, so we all froze having our Christmas dinner. So I hope this one is a real proper Christmas for everyone who can enjoy it.
Yeah, I agree, and I want to thank all of those guests, all of the people that watch and support us, and we do get some lovely emails and comments about what we do. And actually, I always find it quite interesting when somebody will mention, somebody fairly senior in education, say, well, our minister's watching Frank and Stan Chat. They need to watch this. I'm pretty certain they don't, but there are some people within education who do, and we're very grateful for your encouragement and your support. And I want to say thanks to my family, who in all of these episodes have managed to ensure that the front doorbell is answered before it rings. So, and we've got so many parcels coming at the moment, and even though they wonder why we do it, why you and I do it, Stan, every week.
They don't even know what it is because they don't watch it.
Well, my wife doesn't watch them.
Jill doesn't.
She said that I felt, I probably have to
grateful
too
for
much
this
to you anyway.
So, coffee's usually sneaked in just before the end.
But thanks everybody and I hope you all have a fabulous Christmas, and I hope it. Well, is it going to be a prosperous one? I hope it's a prosperous new year. And we're back. I think it's going to be not the first week of January. I think we've got a blank week that week. I think it's the week beginning the 9th of January is when we're back. So we've got a few weeks off now to recharge our batteries. So thank you, Eric, for joining us.
Yeah, I'd like to thank
Thanks,
you
Eric.
guys as well for inviting me back, for having me back. It was wonderful. As always, I really thoroughly enjoyed myself. And from me to everyone, I wish you all, you wish for yourselves for Christmas. Have a wonderful one.
Great. Eric,
I must get back to my day job now.
EricSCraven.com is where you need to.
You said it, Frank. You said it.
Well, thank you, everybody. See you in 2023. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.